Isn't that the loser who never finished college?" my ex said while showing off her new BMW. But then her boss stepped out of the car behind me and said, "Sir, it's an honor to see you again." I turned, smiled, and said, "Aren't you going to tell her who I am?" Now she's begging me to take her back. I, 32M, was standing in the parking lot of an upscale mall downtown when I heard that voice. That specific pitch and tone that once made my heart race, now just made my stomach turn. 5 years had passed since we'd broken up, since she'd walked away telling me I had no ambition, no future. 5 years since she'd made it clear that a college dropout working odd jobs wasn't good enough for her social circle. The BMW pulled up first. Sleek, black, clearly expensive. She stepped out wearing designer everything. Sunglasses that probably cost more than my first car, heels clicking against the pavement like a countdown. She saw me immediately. I watched her eyes scan me from head to toe, taking in my simple jeans and plain jacket, and that familiar smirk appeared on her face. She called out loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, asking if I was the loser who never finished college. Her laugh was sharp, performative, meant to cut and humiliate. She went on about how she'd just been promoted, how her new BMW was a gift to herself, how she was dating someone important now. The whole scene was designed to make me feel small, to remind me of everything she'd said when she left. I didn't respond. I just stood there, waiting. Then the second car pulled up behind me. A Mercedes S-Class, glossy and pristine. I heard the door open, heard the footsteps approaching, and watched her face change in real time. The confidence drained away, replaced by confusion, then shock. Her boss stepped around me, a man in his 50s wearing an immaculate suit, and his face lit up with genuine surprise and respect. He addressed me as sir, said it was an honor to see me again, and asked how I'd been since our last meeting. His tone wasn't casual networking politeness. It was the kind of deference people reserve for someone they truly admire or fear disappointing. I turned to him, smiled, shook his hand warmly. Then I asked him if he was going to tell her who I was. The silence that followed was delicious. Her boss looked between us, clearly sensing the tension but not understanding its source. He started explaining, telling her that I was the founder and CEO of the tech startup his company had recently partnered with. He mentioned the software platform I developed, the one that was currently being integrated into their entire corporate infrastructure. He talked about the acquisition offer I'd turned down last year, the one worth 8 figures, because I wanted to maintain creative control. I watched her face turn white. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to form words, but couldn't quite manage it. Her boss continued, oblivious to the personal history hanging in the air, praising my innovation and vision. He mentioned that their company considered it a privilege to work with mine, that my platform was revolutionary in the industry. She finally managed to ask how we knew each other, her voice barely above a whisper. I told her we used to date, back when I was that college dropout she'd just mocked in front of everyone. Back when I was supposedly going nowhere with my life. Her boss looked uncomfortable then, realizing he'd walked into something messy. He excused himself quickly, saying he'd call me later to discuss our next meeting, and practically fled to his car. I didn't blame him. The air between her and me was thick enough to choke on. She tried to recover, started laughing it off like it was all a misunderstanding, like she hadn't just tried to publicly humiliate me. She said she was just joking, that I should know her sense of humor. She touched my arm, that old familiar gesture she used to use when she wanted something, and suggested we grab coffee to catch up properly. I pulled my arm away and told her I didn't think that was a good idea. I had meetings to get to, a company to run, investors to keep happy. All the things she'd said I'd never be capable of doing. That's when the begging started. Update 1. She started texting me that same evening. At first, they were casual messages about how crazy it was to run into each other, how she'd love to hear about my success story. I ignored them. Then they became more frequent, more desperate. She called twice before I blocked her number. But she found other ways. She connected with me on professional networking sites, sent messages through mutual friends we still had from our college days. She showed up at a tech conference where I was speaking 2 weeks later, positioned herself in the front row, tried to catch my eye the entire presentation. After my talk, she approached me at the networking reception. She looked different somehow, smaller, less sure of herself. She apologized for what she'd said in the parking lot, claimed she'd been having a bad day, and took it out on me unfairly. She wanted to make it right, wanted to take me to dinner to celebrate my success properly. I asked her why she really wanted to reconnect. She gave me some speech about how she'd made a mistake letting me go, how she could see now that I'd always had potential and she'd been too blind to recognize it. She talked about how good we'd been together, how much chemistry we'd had, how rare it was to find someone you connected with on that level. I reminded her that she'd left me because I wasn't good enough, because I dropped out of college to pursue what she called my stupid coding hobby, because I was working as a delivery driver while building my platform at night, and that embarrassed her in front of her graduate school friends, because she wanted someone established, someone who could take her to nice restaurants and impress her family. She insisted she'd been young and stupid, that people grow and change. She reached for my hand across the table and told me she'd grown, that she understood now what really mattered. That success wasn't about degrees or traditional paths. It was about vision and determination, and I clearly had both. I pulled my hand back and told her that success wasn't why I wanted her to see who I'd become. I didn't need her validation or her regret. I'd spent 5 years building something from nothing, proving to myself that I was capable, that I had worth beyond what she'd made me believe. Running into her had been satisfying, sure, but I didn't need anything from her now. She started crying then, real tears that smudged her careful makeup. She admitted she'd been miserable, that her promotion was meaningless, that her boyfriend was boring and only cared about appearances. She said she thought about me constantly, about what we could have had if she'd just believed in me. I told her the truth, that I'd thought about her too, for the first 2 years after we broke up, that I'd imagined moments exactly like this, where I'd proven her wrong and she'd realize her mistake. But somewhere along the way, while building my company and fighting for every small victory, those fantasies had faded. I'd stopped needing her to see my worth because I'd found it myself. She asked if there was any chance for us, any possibility of starting over. I stood up, paid for my coffee, and told her no. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because I genuinely had no interest in revisiting something that had caused me so much pain. I wished her well and walked away. Update 2. 2 months passed. My company secured a major contract that made regional news. We were expanding, hiring, making moves that positioned us as a serious player in the industry. I was busy, focused, living the life I'd worked so hard to build. Then her boss called me directly. We had a good professional relationship, and I assumed it was about our ongoing partnership. Instead, he sounded uncomfortable, apologetic even. He told me she'd been asking about me constantly at work, that it was becoming a problem. She'd apparently been telling colleagues we were getting back together, that we had a history and were working things out. I clarified immediately that this wasn't true, that I'd made my position clear to her multiple times. He sighed with relief and thanked me for being direct. Then he mentioned something that made my blood run cold. She'd been trying to access information about our partnership, asking questions about contract details and financial arrangements that were well outside her role. He wanted to give me a heads up in case it became a larger issue. I thanked him for the warning and hung up, feeling a mixture of anger and concern. This had crossed from awkward personal history into something potentially damaging to my business. I called my lawyer and explained the situation. He advised documenting everything and considering a cease and desist letter if her behavior escalated. It escalated. She showed up at my office building 3 days later. My assistant called to tell me there was someone in the lobby insisting she needed to see me urgently. When I came down, she was there in another expensive outfit, holding a folder of papers, looking determined. She thrust the folder at me and told me to look inside. It was a business proposal. She'd put together a detailed plan for how she could help my company, leveraging her marketing expertise and industry connections. She'd clearly spent significant time on it, researching my business model, identifying growth opportunities, positioning herself as an invaluable asset. I handed the folder back without opening it fully and told her this needed to stop. That showing up at my workplace unannounced was inappropriate. That involving herself in my business affairs without invitation was crossing serious boundaries. That if she didn't respect my clearly stated wishes, I would have to take legal action. She broke down completely then, right there in my lobby. She admitted she'd sabotaged her own relationship, quit her job at the company that partnered with mine, burned through her savings trying to position herself back into my life. She said she'd been obsessed, that seeing my success had made her realize everything she'd given up, and she couldn't accept that it was really over. I felt pity for her in that moment. but not enough to change my mind. I told her she needed professional help, that this level of fixation wasn't healthy for either of us. I offered to connect her with a therapist my company kept on retainer for employee wellness, someone good who could help her process whatever she was going through. She refused, said I was the only one who could fix this, that I had to give her another chance. Security was starting to take notice of the scene she was making. I had no choice but to ask them to escort her out. She left screaming about how I'd changed, how success had made me cold and heartless, how I'd forgotten where I came from. Update 3. The cease and desist letter was delivered a week later. My lawyer handled everything professionally, making it clear that any further contact or attempts to interfere with my business would result in a restraining order and possible legal consequences. For a month, there was silence. I started to relax, thinking maybe she'd finally gotten the message. Then I received a call from one of our mutual friends from college, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. He told me she'd been hospitalized, that she'd had some kind of breakdown and her family had intervened. He thought I should know, given my history with her, though he emphasized he wasn't asking me to do anything. I felt conflicted. Part of me felt responsible somehow, like my rejection had pushed her over an edge. But my therapist, who I'd started seeing when her harassment began, helped me understand that her mental health wasn't my responsibility, that her inability to accept boundaries and move forward was something she needed to address with professional support, not something I could fix by giving in to her demands. I sent flowers to the hospital with a card wishing her well and encouraging her to focus on her recovery. I didn't visit. I didn't call. I maintained the boundary I'd established because I knew that's what we both needed. 3 months later, I heard through the same mutual friend that she was doing better. She'd moved back to her hometown, was working with a therapist regularly, and had apparently started rebuilding her life away from the city and the reminders of everything that had happened. He said she'd asked him to pass along an apology to me, that she understood now why I'd done what I'd done, and that she was sorry for making everything so difficult. I appreciated the apology but didn't respond directly. Some things are better left in the past. The irony of the whole situation wasn't lost on me. When we were together, she'd been so focused on external markers of success, on impressing others and climbing social ladders. She'd seen me as an anchor holding her back from the life she wanted. But in chasing those superficial goals, she'd lost sight of what actually mattered, building something real and meaningful with someone who cared. By the time she realized her mistake, I'd already moved on. Not just from her, but from the person I'd been when we were together. The guy who needed her validation, who measured his worth by her standards. I'd built a company, yes, but more importantly, I'd built a life I was genuinely proud of. I'd surrounded myself with people who valued innovation and hard work over pedigree and appearances. I'd learned that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Would I take her back? Never. Not because I wanted revenge or to make her suffer, but because we weren't the same people anymore. She'd become a reminder of everything I'd worked to leave behind, those feelings of inadequacy and self-doubt. And I'd become a symbol to her of everything she thought she wanted but couldn't have. Sometimes the best revenge isn't a dramatic confrontation or a public humiliation. Sometimes it's just living well, building something meaningful, and having the strength to walk away when someone tries to pull you back into a version of yourself you've outgrown. That parking lot encounter gave me closure I didn't even know I needed. It confirmed that I'd made the right choices, taken the right path, become the right version of myself. I still see her boss occasionally at industry events. He's never mentioned her again, and I appreciate his professionalism. Our companies continue to work together successfully. My business keeps growing, and I keep focusing on what matters to me: innovation, integrity, and building something that will last. As for her, I genuinely hope she finds peace and happiness. Just not with me. That chapter of my life is closed, and I have no interest in reopening it. The loser who never finished college turned out just fine. Better than fine, actually. And that's all the revenge I'll ever need.